Hi, this is Moritz from Endorphins, and I will give you a short overview over the shuttle system we just finished in January. So, let's start at the first module. On this side, it's the shuttle control. The shuttle control is a 16 output MIDI to CV converter, which is at the same time the power supply for the complete system. Via a web editor, you can freely assign any of these outputs to whatever functionality you want them to have. So they are outputting all of the MIDI signals you have, like pitch, gate, triggers, clock dividers, taps, and so on and so on. Velocity parameters, CC messages, stepped and smoothed out, so we multiplex them, and you can use it by connecting it to an iPad just with the camera connection kit. It's a class compliant MIDI device, so the iPad totally recognizes it. Or you can plug a PC or an Apple, and it's also recognized as a MIDI device. At the same time, you can use one of the USB-A to put an additional class-compliant MIDI device, like a keyboard or stuff like that. So you have two different MIDI sources feeding it. Also, you can route through MIDI from one side to the other. So having maybe your computer controlling the arpeggio pitch of your arpeggio you're playing on a keyboard or something. You can store up to 16 different presets, and the preset will be done on a website, so you should use something like a web MIDI app for the iPad or Google Chrome, which is able to do web MIDI. So the browser recognizes the shuttle control, and you can directly flash your presets in there. Also, it's not only translating MIDI data to CV, it is also generating own CVs, which means you can have LFOs that are tapped in that case, so they are relating to my MIDI files coming from here. It's counting 3 notes, and then it's spitting out the LFOs in the correct tempo. As I have some syncopes in here, the LFO is going faster and slower, as you see, and down here I'm creating some random CVs that are also related to the note. So whenever a gate on comes, there is created a new random CV. Also, it can create envelopes by being triggered from a MIDI note. There are different options, from ADs to ASRs and so on. You can alter attack and decay via CC messages, so it's a pretty versatile thing. And in the newest firmware, there's also an arpeggiator integrated. So far for the shuttle control. The next piece in the modular is the further generator, our well-known sound source we deliver since almost 5 years. It's a dual complex waveform oscillator based on the idea of a Buchla 259. With the modulator oscillator, with a modulation index here, where you can select whether you want to use balanced, which is ring modulation, amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, or the further modulation. The further modulation means it's modulating the wave shaper section, which is over here, behind the carrier. So the modulation comes from the modulator through the modulation index to the carrier, and then afterwards the signal passes into the wave shaper, and that comes out 2 times here at the final output with the triangle sign. Both of the oscillators have separate outputs for using them as standalones. In my setup, I'm using the final output for the lead sound I'm playing, and in this case here, the rectangle of the modulator for the bass lines. Which brings me over to the next bigger module. We skip the gateway for now, I explain that in a second. This is the grand terminal. The grand terminal is a dual envelope generator, dual filter bank, so it's 2 channels, and up here we have an effects section. The envelopes are fully digital, the complete module is fully digital, which means that you can use the envelopes in 3 different modes. The cycle mode is LFO kind of style, and when you make it very short, you can also play it as an oscillator with 1 volt per octave, down here. And if you're using it in trigger mode, when the rising flank of a gate comes, then you can use it. It's exactly playing one time the envelope. When you're going into flight mode, then you can. Then the note length is taken as a sustain. So I have an ASR. These knobs do the length of attack, length of decay. These down here, those two black ones, are the characteristic from exponential to linear to logarithmic. Same for here. And these jacks down here are taking the CV to either modulate the characteristics or the length of attack and decay. There is an option to switch in between which of the jacks are influenced by these CV inputs. This is the gateway, which I skipped and will explain in a second. Right here we have our filter, which is X and Y. So X is cutoff in the most cases and Y is resonance in the most cases. You have a Mogish filter, an acid kind one. You have a Vectrol without resonance, where the resonance is altering the length of the Vectrol. And you have as the fourth one Vectrol with resonance, which is pretty gnarly. And then in the second row, when you skip through that, you see the lights are fully lit, which is the lower row, and half lit is the second row. So you have low pass, high pass, band pass, and a comp filter, which is an all pass. But we implemented something as an all pass always lets through signal. With a flick in the switch on the gateway, you can make this input here not being responsible for modulating the resonance, but it's putting a VCA behind the VCF, so you can still perform using the bandpass and the envelopes because of your having VCA after the VCF. So that's also very nice. I will play some tunes in a second so you can listen to it. Then after the signal came here, it's passing through the filter section, which I can, by simply pressing this button for a second, bypass for the bass. So it's more useful. So you only have the lead line affected and the bass line is dry. You have 8 different kinds of effects, and by pressing the button I'm stepping through the effects. There is no legend for the effects, but the first 5 ones are reverbs. Then we have 2 delays and a chorus. The same for this side, so I don't explain it once again. Now let's go to the gateway. The gateway is on one side an expander in this area here where the dotted lines are for the grand terminal. So these switches here are for airplane A, which is this side. So you see here shape, CV in, duration. By flicking this switch I select which parameter is affected by this CV input here. Over here I have the VCF mode, which means this switch I use to decide whether this jack here is taking CV for resonance or CV for the VCF that I can put behind it. The upper side here and the lower side is a tuner for any oscillator. So it works with every oscillator. So you go with the pitch CV input here. Then you give the tuner something to listen to, which is in this case the sine wave of the further generator. And then you have the dropout here, which is the buffered CV that you then use, the tuned CV for the key input of the oscillator. It works, you just play an A note, a static A note on your sequencer, and then you push the button, and then it tunes to the next closest A. You have that twice, so you can tune both oscillators and whatever oscillator you have in your system, of course. So at the end here we have our small performance mixer, I would say. It's the Cockpit. It's also a very versatile module. We have 4 channels, all stereo, but you can jumper it on the backside that you make them take mono, because if you plug a mono cable you only hear the left side. So you have to jumper it, and then it's gotten split to both channels, and you have it on both channels, as this is a stereo output. One of the features is by pressing the encoders you're muting the signal or turning it on. Channel 1 and 2 are sending a mono sum of the stereo signal to channel 3 and 4. As you see, this is different jacks than these ones, which means they are putting out audio over the S thing here, the TRRS, so tip, ring, ring, sleeve. So this is the ground and this is the microphone that you maybe know from the microphone headset for iPhones or stuff like that. And then it's sending this sound into the iPad. Then you can use an app on the iPad and mangle the audio, and then it returns in the same thing, in the same cable. So it is a send and return for 2 channels. So what I can do, or what the intention was, that I'm creating MIDI data, translating it here at the shuttle control, playing the sounds in the further generator through the grand terminal, doing my modulations and my filtering and effecting, putting it into the Cockpit mixer, sending it from the Cockpit mixer into the iPad again, doing some mangling here with some apps, returning the sound into here and having it at the final output of my complete system. So I have something like a circle thing going on, which is a very nice way to integrate all kinds of things. In the future there will be an expander for that with switches for switching in between mono and stereo, and some 1/4 inch jacks to incorporate or use outboard gear in the studio or guitar pedals or something like that. So you can expand the send and return possibilities for affecting the sound. Up here I did patch something special. It's a little bit quirky at the moment. Give me a second. You see that lights jumping around here. This means Grand Terminal has a secondary mode. By pressing buttons, now it's just jumping in these direction here. So I applied unipolar random voltages from here, and when I'm pressing these 2 buttons, I'm getting into the alternative mode where this jack is not for resonance anymore, but scanning through the filters. So every time I select a new filter and turn the knob, and select a new one and turn the knob, and select a new one and turn the knob, and so on and so on, I create 8 sets of data, so the parameters are stored. So I can jump through the filters, listening to the different filterings and the different settings. The same, I can do it for channel A separately and for channel B separately. And at the same time I can do the same thing with the effects section. So I have 8 effects, I can manipulate my effects, saving the presets by just skipping through the effects, and then scanning through the effects by bipolar voltage, whatever you want it to be. So you just can go and say, I'm making a MIDI clip with a CC message and have correctly assigned values, so I can directly address different settings of effects, of filters, and therefore do some glitchy stuff or whatever, or you leave it in random as I do mostly, to supply some more depth to what I'm playing. Because right in this set I have my my note data doubled, so I have one system playing notes, simple stuff, electronic techno music kind of thing, and I duplicated the same data and send it up here. So I have I have it doubled, but it is affected, so I can smoothly put it below the normal, more or less dry, beefy rhythmical thing, and make it a little bit more roomy, gritty, whatever it is. Give it a little bit more of a great feeling.